I thought I'd talk a little bit about applique in this tutorial because we saw one of the contestants applique a pocket on to a sportswear piece, and he used a zigzag stitch. Now normally you would sew on a pocket with a straight stitch, but a zigzag can be an embellishment, but it also can be used as an applique. And you can see I've done this side of the pocket using a zigzag stitch. Obviously start with a sampling. I've got onto my domestic machine and I've started with a very wide and a long zigzag stitch, and then slowly I refined it down to the width and the length of the stitch that I wanted. This turned out to be not too wide, so I went back to this scale here, which you can see has worked out quite well. It's sturdy and it gives it a bit of a lacy, decorative effect versus the straight top stitch. The other way you can apply a pocket or any other shape using applique is to use lace or trim. So in this case you might line up the lace, obviously secure this down first so that it hides under the pocket, and then as long as you line it up on this double edge, see, because you've already got a turned in edge here, the two layers, so that you're sewing on top of the two layers and your stitch doesn't rock down, fall down to the garment fabric itself. Or you can use a rickrack. Here I've made my own using some pinking shears and some felt. And again, it's about placement so that you don't end up sewing on and off what you're appliquing. Okay, so that's just one way of using zigzag stitch to applique a pocket. Applique can be used when using a variety of textures as well. And you can use some of the textures and some of the makeup of your applique to help out, anchor it to your fabric. So here I have a base cloth of raw silk, which is heavy texture and a very loose weave, and I'm going to applique this beaded lace on top, and I'm going to use the beads to do that. So you have to choose a beading needle, obviously, that will fit through your bead, and then you can simply stitch through and secure the beads as you go. It's a very sturdy way of anchoring lace onto your base fabric, and it gives you a very sturdy finish as well, instead of couching the stitches on to, say, some of the cord or some of the tulle or the lace. So this is another way that you can use applique to a very neat effect. Just make sure you choose the right needle, and a good cotton covered polyester thread is very good as well. And there you are, you have a nice sturdy finish there, using the beads to help you applique onto your base cloth. Staying with our lace, I want to show you a quick trick that will help you miter a piece of lace that may come in handy for one of your applique projects. So I have a piece of lace here that I've measured. It's 3/4 of an inch wide, and I've set up a simple template here marking 3/4 of an inch on either side of this right angle corner. And a very simple way to set up a miter is to lay this lace, same width as your template, along, and then turn it back at the edge where you have this square, and then turn it back again along the corner so that it then follows along. So this is the basis of your miter, and it just helps to visualize this. That's what you're doing. You're just using the square at the point you want to miter. Now let's give that a little press. This is such a handy trick to use, and if you have the time, obviously some of our sewers didn't have that kind of time to set this all up, but if you practice with this method, then when it comes to something like a competition or somewhere where you're short of time, then you've got an advantage and you can see the head, what it is that you're doing. Now pretend that seam has been sewn, and I'm just going to press that open so that you don't have a seam showing one way or the other. It's split right down the middle, and then even though, darn, I've got a leak. And then even though it's not sewn, you can see how clean that miter is going to be. And obviously it's a bit fiddly with lace because sometimes it has a mind of its own, but you can soon coax it into position. So now we have our sailor collar, and we've marked our double layer of parallel trim. And we're going to use that same technique where you lay your trim along, set up one of your corners first, and make sure that you have enough trim to go all the way through the parallel edges of your collar. So you've laid the trim out, you turn it back where your corner meets here. You can set up a pin at a 45-degree angle just to stabilize your trim, and then you just simply turn it back at the 90-degree angle. So there you are, you're all set. You can do one of these corners, as I said, and get yourself through to half this project, and then come back and do that one. Or simply start and work your way from this corner to this corner. But I want to show you this way, because now we're going to sew it, and I'm going to just say one final thing about this. I'm going to start with a stitch at about 3 on my industrial here. And as I get near the corner, I'm going to shorten the stitch just a little bit, because we want the stitch to land absolutely on the corner. So I'm just going to dial a lower stitch now. And as I get to the corner, I've got a little bit more room to maneuver. And now I'm just going to walk the stitch right into the corner. Now I'm still on the small stitch, and I'm going to start sewing again. Just give myself a couple of stitches and then go back to the longer stitch, keeping this firmly on the guideline that I've set up, making sure it's parallel. Don't pull the trim, don't ease it in, just work flat. Okay, now there you can see we've got a nice corner, and I'm using a contrast thread. So it's going to look a lot better if I match the thread tone on tone. And then simply do the same thing on this pass. Start with a slightly longer stitch. As you get closer to that corner, shorten your stitch slightly so you have a better chance of getting right in that corner. Proceed on with a few short stitches and then lengthen them a little bit. Not too much far apart, but just give yourself a smaller stitch so that you've got a better chance of meeting that corner. And there it is, your mitered ribbon on a sailor's collar.